Hello everybody, this is Yoko's Anime Reactions, and let us continue with part 9. Here's hoping we can finish soon. Dang, 80 pages left. Passing Hypebeast's creation. I asked to go to the library since I didn't have any more classes to attend that day, but Riardo refused. That much was to be expected, so I dedicated my time to making manuscripts to be printed. I started fixing up the stories that had been written in childish language, which would give us plenty to work with once spring came around. The next day, I had practical music lessons in the afternoon. The professor had given me a song to learn, which I simply needed to play in order to pass. It was actually one of the songs that Ferdinand had given me to learn in the past, so after practicing just a few times, I played it in front of the professor and instantly got a passing grade. The professor gave an approving nod. You have learned songs other than the ones you composed yourself, I see. I simply practice as my personal musician instructs. While I very much hope you are bringing this musician with you to the tea party, I am ever so looking forward to it. I am as well. Being invited to a tea party by a professor is such an honor that my musician and I can have hardly been able to sleep. Oh my, what an exaggeration. When our conversation was over, the lesson came to an end. Believe it or not, my statement hadn't been a complete exaggeration. Rosina had actually been losing sleep lately, though not due to stress. She was dedicating her time to arranging the songs and writing up lyrics to accompany them. She was genuinely excited for the tea party so much so that the enthusiastic smile on her face hadn't so much as faltered in days. You learned that pretty fast, Rosemine, Wilfried said. He was faced with a song that he hadn't played before, and he seemed to be struggling with it. He stared down at the sheet of music while putting his all into his practice. I sat down on my seat and merely shrugged in response, having already seized victory at the very first opportunity. You can play any song without much effort, Wilfried continued. You must have a natural talent for the Harpspiel. Not true. Ferdinand just kept giving me harder and harder songs to learn. I even practiced this particular song right after my debut. After your debut, he asked in surprise. Naturally, the song he had played back then was one meant suited for children of debuting age, not one usually given to a 10-year-old. He frowned, realizing that this gap between us had existed even that long ago. If you wish to become a master Harpspiel player as well, might I suggest taking Ferdinand's lessons with me, I suggested. He gives me 5 or 6 songs to learn each season, so since I never knew when he might ask me to play them, I need to work my fingers to the bone for Rosina to master them as soon as possible. I thought back to how Ferdinand would tell me to bring my Harpspiel at a seemingly random point toward the end of each season. My heart had pounded nervously in my chest with such each practice session. Not meeting his expectations would earn me a drawn-out scolding about how I hadn't worked hard enough. Then he'd go on to list every single way in which I had messed up. When I passed, he would simply give me far more difficult songs to learn before kicking me out, thus starting the cycle all over again. Upon hearing my explanation, Wilfried closed his eyes in disbelief, then shook his head. You're the only one who can easily keep up with Uncle's demands and expectations, Rosemine. Mana and magic tools are about my limit. I don't want to learn music under him too. I'm fine with things the way they are. Just to clarify, I wouldn't say I'm easily keeping up with them. Another day passed, and I was speedily working my way through making the study guides and such for the second years. The process thankfully didn't take much time since I was just organizing Eckerd's and Ferdinand's notes. The study documents those who went to the library had borrowed from me, and the information that had already been gathered for me the year before. Now that I look at them properly, quite a few classes have changed considerably since Ferdinand and Eckerd were here, I observed. It hadn't really hit me before then, since I had only looked at the notes for classes in the Apprentice Night Course when working as part of the Ray's Angelica's Grade Squadron, but it was a lot more apparent now that I was looking at the notes for the first and second year classes. Feline gave a small shrug as I compared the documents everyone had put together. The majority of the professors were changed after the Civil War, so it was only natural that the course material would change as well, she said. It turned out that most professors had assistants, and when a professor died or retired, those assistants would take their places and teach in a similar fashion. The system was completely upturned, however, by the mass purging that followed the Civil War, since most professors and their assistants belonged to the same faction. They were all relieved of duty. There were some instances of classes being changed entirely as a result. Why couldn't the new teachers just check the study documents in the library to see what was covered in previous years, I pondered. The professors have their pride as researchers to consider. They were probably looking to distinguish themselves from the professors who had just gotten fired, Wilfried interjected while looking over the documents himself. I certainly understood that, but I would have much preferred them to prioritize the learning of their students. Doesn't that mean the older study guides won't be useful in the slightest, I asked. There was nothing more annoying for a student like me trying to pass on the first day, having to root through old study guides and resources that were completely outdated. I pursed my lips, annoyed that my time in the library was getting delayed once again. Feline giggled. Will it soothe your frustrations to think that the library will soon be filled with textbooks covering the newly changed courses, Lady Rosemine? You are a wise one, Feline. I must admit now that I feel ever so slightly grateful for the war. It all depends on perspective, Wilfred agreed with a nod. In any case, we have almost finished putting together our study resources. What will you do when we are done, Feline? I asked. A tea party is planned for all the lay nobles who wish to become apprentice scholars. It seemed that once the study resources were done, Feline would be putting her time into associating with lay nobles from other duchies. She mentioned that she wanted to make at least some headway with entering society, so that she would find more valuable information for me. I am still nervous about joining a tea party with older students, so we thought we would first practice with each other, she continued. Is there anything in particular I should or should not bring up during the tea party? A tea party, I suppose that is something I should consider doing myself. Wilfred nodded. Yeah, and I've got that tea party with my cousins. We should get the older students together and discuss what we should and shouldn't reveal at those kinds of gatherings, he suggested. Oh, definitely. Yes, you don't want to screw yourself over. As we thought it over, Hartmut decided to give us some advice. He had passed his class that morning and was visiting the common room to kill some time. You should know, Feline, they're absolutely going to ask you about Ehrenfest's rising grades. I'm not even a first year and people are asking me all kinds of questions. The efforts of the Better Grades Committee had ultimately paid off, and with students of all years easily passing their written lessons, plus all our first years having passed our written lessons on the first day, Ehrenfest had apparently become a hot topic of conversation throughout the academy. Lord Wilfrid is... Oh, I'm hearing the garbage man. Okay. Lord Wilfrid is standing out due to his excellent grades, but you are garnering a reputation for many more reasons, Lady Rosemine, Hartmut continued. Oh yes, I certainly am. I was the last one to pass my mana control class because I turned so many phase stones to dust. I apparently attacked a professor with a baby-shaped high beast, and I collapsed in the farthest hall. Truly, I am making an excellent impression, I said, glum about having stood out in all the worst ways. What do you say when they ask about Ehrenfest anyway? I tell them that our grades are rising thanks to the Saint of Ehrenfest, and that next year will continue as it comes even more of a surprise. Hartmut! Is that not the truth? The Better Grades Committee was your idea, Lady Rosemine, and the first year's passing all their classes was a result of your passion for the library. Those who have learned your mana compression method will show excellent results in their practical lessons next year, and so I have not lied whatsoever. You seem to be unaware, Lady Rosemine, but you are not standing out in exclusively unfavorable ways. In fact, your reputation has made you quite enviable as well, with many being well aware that you created original compositions, passed your written lessons with almost perfect marks, and passed court etiquette in a single try. Oh, that definitely would get her some attention, considering all the other greater duchies had such a hard time of it. Hartmut gave a bright smile, then turned to Feline and continued, There is no need to inform those from other duchies of the details. Keep the information you disclose vague, but under no circumstances are you to lie. You must first earn the trust of your enemies before you can deceive and betray them. I understand, Feline said with a nod, looking at Hartmut with a gaze that made her respect for him all too clear. Oh my goodness, I said, having had a sudden epiphany. It's your fault, Hartmut. You're the reason all the rumors about me are getting exaggerated in weird ways. Lady Rosemine, that is a misunderstanding. I am not the only one to blame. Everyone from our duchy is working together to spread the glory of the Saint of Ehrenfest. That's even worse. At the very least, delegate that energy to elevating Wilfrid, since he's likely to become the next Archduke. I'm just a humble, everyday student planning to spend most of my time in the library, I protested. Much to my displeasure, Hartmut, as well as everyone else in the common room, said it was already much too late for that. In the first place, Lady Rosemine, it would not be good for Lord Wilfrid to grow accustomed to receiving credit for your actions. Right, I want to do what I can on my own, Wilfrid said. I had no choice but to agree with them, and it was beyond me to realize that my doing so would cause the legend of the Saint of Ehrenfest to escalate even further. We had our practical high beast creation lesson in the afternoon. Our previous lesson had been cut short when Professor Forlarn, the dormitory supervisor for Ehrenbach, passed out upon seeing my high beast, and she was evidently mad enough about it to claim that I had attacked her. I don't really care about her holding a grudge, but I don't want her to keep me from passing out of spite. I was sure that there was nothing to worry about thanks to my illicit deal with Hersher, but from what I knew about her, there was always a chance she might forget about it entirely and not come to the class. She seemed to be the kind of person to forget promises when absorbed in her research, and it was hard to trust someone who seemed to be even more of a mad scientist than Ferdinand. In the end, however, my fears were unfounded. Hersher came to the class along with many other professors whom I didn't recognize. "Oh my, professors, what brings you all here today?" Fraulein asked. "Do you not remember? Your passing out last time interrupted my brewing. I would not like for that to happen again, and so I have decided to observe today's lesson in its entirety," Hersher said with a chuckle, a noticeable glint in her purple eyes. "Incidentally, I will not bear a grudge for the materials wasted in that failure, as long as you pay for them, that is." "Well, I advise you to seek recompense from the dangerous student who attacked me with her Fabies." "I wanted to question that, actually. As far as I can tell, the high beast was not one particularly suited for attacking others. Are you not just exaggerating the incident to avoid accepting blame?" "What was that?" Furlong stood up abruptly, only for a sharp-eyed older man to step between them. The smile plastered across his face, being the only peaceful thing about him. "I cannot speak for all this exaggeration business, but with rumors of a student attacking a professor with a Fabies-shaped high beast going around, it would be better for everyone to have other professors observe your class. It should prove whether or not what you have said is the truth," the older man said, using security and confirmation to justify his and the other professors' attendance. Smart man. Frau Alarm had no choice but to accept, since she was the one spreading rumors about me being unsafe in the first place. But I don't get why. But apparently that's going to be visited in another book, I guess. So, yeah, I still don't get why. "Very well, you can all see for yourself how dangerous her high beast is," she said, speaking in a tone befitting a sore loser, before moving to stand at the center of all the students and instructing us to take out our high beast face stones. The other professors wasted no time in positioning themselves around me, seeming to be preparing for the worst. I bemoaned their lack of trust in me, which only made Hersher break into a smile. "Lady Rosamund, everyone here is interested in your high beast. They are all passionate researchers with enough intense interest in new things to have warranted me calling upon them," she explained. In other words, they weren't actually on guard. They were looking at me with the intrigued looks one would give a research subject. I decided it was probably best for me to obediently show them Leslie and put on a show to prove he wasn't dangerous. I can endure it for the sake of a passing grade. According to Hersher, the professor who had seen my panda bus after I collapsed in the farthest hall had told the others that it was very unusual and that its clunky movements are very unlike those of a grun. This had caught the interest of several other teachers. "I would also like to get a closer look at you making your drivable high beast," Hersher continued, holding a face stone for her own purposes. It seemed she was preparing to make a drivable high beast herself. "Those of you who can form high beasts, do so now," Fraulein instructed. The gathered professors urged me on as I begrudgingly created my one-person panda bus. "Oh, I see. It has something of a flat face, but this certainly is a grun," one said. "There's a seat, but how in the world does one get inside?" asked another. The professors had closed in on Leslie almost immediately to touch and examine him, so I hadn't been able to take a step forward myself. "Lady Rosamund, you mentioned that you can change the size of your high beast, correct?" Hersher asked. I grew Leslie into the size of a large family van, and no sooner had I opened the door than Hersher gleefully climbed inside and started touching the inner walls. She had done exactly the same thing the last time she saw my panda bus, so she acted without an ounce of hesitation. "Aha, I see. So this is how you ride it," one of the professors said. There was no mistaking that they were researchers who loved discovering new things, and they all went into Leslie one after another to look around. "Lady Rosamund, what is this? How does it move?" one asked. "Ah, this is quite comfortable," a second professor sighed. The nearby students watched in a daze as the professors, who were supposed to be here to determine whether my baby-shaped high beast proves a threat of any kind, instead examined it with excitement. "Look, everyone, Professor Hersher can ride it even while wearing a skirt," one of the girls exclaimed. "Now that you mention it, I did hear that one could ride such a high beast without changing into riding clothes," one other murmured. "Such a high beast would actually be cute if made as a shoe mill," said a third. That's what Ferdinand said. The female students were starting to approach as they talked, their interest having clearly been caught. Everyone said that the panda bus looked like a grun, but the first years who weren't familiar with such babies didn't seem to find it scary in the slightest. "Watch yourselves, that thing is abnormal and dangerous," Fraulein shrieked desperately, but everyone could clearly tell from the other professors' complete lack of concern, and nothing dangerous was going to happen. "I believe I shall use Lady Rosamund's high beast as a reference and make one of my own," Hersher announced. "I've always thought it would be convenient to have a high beast for carrying around tools and materials." "Professor Hersher, is making a new high beast really that easy?" I asked. "My guard knights have led me to believe that it would be impossible to handle two." It might be a challenge for knights considering they need to make split-second decisions, but if one has ample time to think, it's quite easy to change the focus of one's mind. Furthermore, making another high beast is no problem for me since I am quite fine abandoning my original one. Hersher took a Fey Beast in hand and started making her new high beast, all the while focusing her eye on my panda bus. Perhaps due to how much she was used to controlling her mana, she was able to complete the process with surprising speed and noticeable ease. Wow, a cheer arose from the students as Hersher finished making her high beast. Beside Leslie, there was now a one-person high beast with the head of a shoe mill. Oh, cute! It had reins in the place of a steering wheel, and there was only one seat, indicating that she didn't plan on having other people ride with her. This was, however, a considerable amount of space in the back for luggage. It truly was a high beast made just for her. Hersher flicked her wrist, and much like with Leslie, a door opened on the other side of the high beast. She climbed inside, still wearing her skirt, then sat down in a seat that looked very similar to mine, gripped the reins, and started pouring mana into the shoe mill. Soon enough, it started to move around, then soared above the hall with very little effort. This meant she was already able to perfectly visualize something flying without wings. Nice! Wow, she might be even more open to new ideas than Ferdinand. Talk about being open-minded. I know! Unlike Ferdinand. It seems that Reigns can control it just fine, Hersher commented, climbing out of her shoe mill high beast with an exceptionally content smile. It moves and flies just like my previous high beast, and given that I can leisurely relax in the chair, it feels even more graceful than riding a normal high beast. Professor Hersher, could you teach us to make a high beast like this too? One female student asked. I would like to know as well, and added a second. The girls all wanted to copy Hersher's high beast since shoe mills were considered much more acceptable and the students were more familiar with using reins. She was a star among the girls in an instant, but nobody came to look at my panda bus. Leslie is cute too, I protested. That's where you're mistaken, little one. He is certainly interesting, though, the older man said, perhaps trying to comfort me. He then went to leave the class with the others, saying that his time here had been quite productive indeed. All those who have created their high beast shall pass upon flying at once in a circle above the academy, Hersher announced, proactively striding outside. It was getting more and more cramped in the hall due to all the high beasts, so the students who were already confident in their riding ability turned their high beasts back into face stones and followed after her. The moment the cold outside air hit me, my body tensed up so much that I could practically feel myself shrinking. I hurriedly brought out and climbed into Leslie, then gripped onto the steering wheel. My high beast was a lot warmer inside since the walls blocked the icy wind. On the bright side, the Royal Academy isn't quite as cold as Ehrenfest. It was still cold since it was winter, but Ehrenfest was even colder, and the snow there was much worse. It was this slight change in climate that reminded me I wasn't in Ehrenfest anymore. I was at the center of the country, far away from home. Shall we go? Hersher asked. She took the lead, going up into the air when her shoe mill, while I stayed close behind. Farlarm had remained indoors to aid those who were still struggling to create their high beasts. We lined up our high beasts in the air and then flew over the academy, which was my first time seeing the entire grounds. Before this point, I had simply teleported inside and then used the dormitory entrance to go straight into the hallway by the auditorium. Not once had I gotten a look of the academy exterior or the dormitory from the outside. The Royal Academy was located atop a sizable hill, the slopes of which were covered in thick conifer tree forests on all sides. The trees were even evergreen, meaning they kept their leaves even in winter, and the coating of snow that topped them made the entire world appear white. The grounds themselves were so sprawling that they actually took me by surprise. Directly beneath us were the massive primary building of the academy, surrounded by ivory buildings placed on top of smaller hills nearby. The ivory structure dotting the forest were probably the dormitory buildings. I saw several as we circled the grounds, but in all honesty, I couldn't tell which belonged to Ehrenfest. Riarda had been right when she said that each dorm was built in a unique architectural style, though, and it was fascinating to see all the variety. Let's see. Are there any buildings here that look like Ehrenfest Castle? I guess that'd be the one over there, or maybe that one. Not only was the Royal Academy surrounded by slopes and thick forests, the area around was covered in a sea of clouds that hid everything beneath it. Maybe I would have even seen more had the weather been better, but as far as I could tell from my aerial view, the only things here were the dormitories and the academy itself. At the very least, I didn't see any commoner cities attached to it like the lower city in Ehrenfest, nor did I see any crop-covered fields. It was entirely as though the academy was just a massive temple. That wouldn't surprise me. Perhaps this was where the gods had descended upon the country and given the king the power to rule over the people, as described in the Bible. This thought ran through my mind as I gazed across the academy's grounds. When covered with such a delicate blanket of snow like this, it was certainly a fantastical enough location for the gods to descend and make their presence known. All of you passed Hybeast creation, Hersher announced, signaling my completion of yet another class. Thanks to her, drivable Hybeast became a popular trend among the female students throughout the academy. Nice! And that's your trend you started. Ooh, here we go. Wait. How far have I gotten? Dang. Stat fundamentals. There were still a number of days left before it was time for my stat usage lessons, so I spent the time making picture book manuscripts and studying for my upcoming second year. Once I mastered using my staff, there would be no more barriers between the library and me, so I was practically counting down the days until class began. One girl sighed, "It's only at times like this that I find your talents vexatious, Lady Rosemine." The girls were all studying blisteringly hard to pass their written lessons, eager to accompany me to the library for Schwartz and Weiss's measuring session. Brunhilde was being especially industrious as she wanted to schedule the tea party with the music professor as soon as possible. "Lady Rosemine, you do not need to rush passing your lessons," another girl added. "At this rate, we may not be able to attend with Schwartz and Weiss are measured," noted a third. The girls were working with the same fervent and desperate expressions the first years had worn when aiming to pass all their written classes in one go. It seemed their passion was at least somewhat contagious, as the boys who still had written lessons left were putting their all into studying as well. I gazed around the common room with a smile, then shook my head at all the pleading eyes. I had already waited long enough. "I will pass my stat lesson as soon as possible, and then go straight to the library," I declared. Far from slowing down, I would rather the class begin right away, so that I may be done with it immediately. Hartmut chuckled. "Learning how to use your staff is not so easy, Lady Rosemine. Lay nobles have to spend almost the entire term learning to use them. Even Archduke candidates struggle to pass on their first day. I'm afraid you will simply need to give up on this one." His doubts only made me want to pass even more. "I will do everything in my power to ensure that I pass," I replied. "No effort shall be spared in my struggle to reach the library." "Indeed, Hartmut," Brunhilde added coolly, as she continued focusing on her studies, "there is nothing that can stop Lady Rosemine's surge toward the library. If she intends to pass right away, then we as her retainers must assume it will happen. I am already struggling to plan the upcoming tea party, considering her desperation to do nothing but hold up in the library." It seemed that Brunhilde had made much progress herself. She only had one more class to finish before she passed them all. "I see. So are you saying Lady Rosemine will hold nothing back for the sake of the library? That she would throw her absolute all into this endeavor?" "Exactly. In that case, I look forward to witnessing you give rise to a new legend, Lady Rosemine." Do I really have to choose between gaining access to the library and avoiding a new legend? This is rough. I really don't want to stand out any more than I do already. After all, obscurity is essential to a quiet, peaceful life. Then again, I won't truly be at peace until the library is mine to explore. What should I do? This truly is a philosophical dilemma for the ages. Or is it? Could I ever pick anything other than the library? No, I could not. "Lady Rosemine, if you wish not to stand out, we suggest you hold off on immediately passing at least one of your classes," my retainers noted as I exited the dormitory to go to my staff class. Wolfried and I gathered at the small hall like usual, along with the archnobles and such. Hersher and Roffen entered soon after. They were evidently our professors for the day. "Staffs can only be used by nobles," Roffen began, clenching one hand into a determined fist. "If you don't have a staff, you aren't a noble. To be recognized as a noble, one needed to possess enough mana to recover the divine will. The mana measuring done at baptisms was for this purpose. A staff was apparently one of the things that the first ever king had been given by the gods. He had up to that point possessed more mana than he could ever use, and the staff he was granted afforded him to freely use it all. Or so the Bible said. Anyway, I wasn't sure whether everything in the Bible was completely true, but after all my experiences in this world, I imagined something similar had actually happened. There was surely some base for the legend to have been formed upon. "We shall begin by forming the staff," Hersher said. "Everyone please create a staff in a form that you find easy to use. Once you have done so, please come to me. We will ask you to create and dispel the staff 3 times in quick succession to confirm you are comfortable with the technique." "Right, I am gonna make an amazing staff. It's so weird saying that word," Wolfried said. "It makes me think I have a lisp." "Oh no, I think I do." Everyone probably had the same idea. They started forming their staffs, focusing on the size and shape. The Archduke candidates were used to controlling their mana, so they were putting their absolute all into producing significant creations worthy of their status. The Archnobles, on the other hand, were less used to controlling their mana. Most were struggling to create a staff at all. "Mine's gonna look so cool. What are you gonna make, Rosemine?" Wolfried asked, his dark green eyes sparkling with excitement as he glanced my way. Little did he know I had already spent an entire day playing around with my staff before eventually coming to the conclusion that simple was best. I intend to make a simple staff like the one most adults use, I replied. Oh, what? That's so boring, though. Why not put a little more effort into it? Your high beast is already weird enough, so nobody's going to be surprised if your staff is weird, too. Leslie wasn't weird. His focus on practicality simply meant he was a little different from other high beasts. It wasn't as though I had deliberately made him unique, either. Standing out for the sake of standing out wasn't important to me. High beasts I can understand, but I don't see the need to obsess over staffs too much, I explained. You can just keep messing around with yours until you realize I'm right, I silently added, as I walked over to Hersher. Oh my, Lady Rosemine, the professor said. How can I help? I can make my staff. Can I do the rest now? You practiced on your own, didn't you? She asked, looking at me like I was some kind of problem child before encouraging me to demonstrate. I worked my mana and made a staff of the same shape and size 3 times in quick succession. Hersher blinked in surprise and sighed. You have excellent control of your staff. There should be no issue with you moving forward to the next step. You will now need to use your staff to fill a magic tool with mana. Roffin, are the face stones ready? Yep, all ready, Roffin replied, patting a bag on his hip. Hersher watched as he started walking over to the side of the hall away from the other students. Lady Rosemine, you will follow Roffin and learn to make an ordnance. Attempt to have it fly over to me, she said. I nodded in response, spurring her to lean forward with a grin. Ordinances are used in this introductory class because they can be created from the smallest drop of mana, she added in a hushed voice. Do try to restrain yourself, okay? I had previously learned from my magecraft test that the phase stones used to make ordinances were no ordinary phase stones. They were specifically crafted for a specific and limited purpose. Everyone called them phase stones because they looked very similar, but in reality they were kind of magic tool. Green phase stones were likewise crafted for a particular purpose, and they were often used in daily life. Attendants in particular found them useful, since they allowed for a source of water to be linked with a pitcher. The phase stone embedded in the bottom of the pitcher could be activated with the tap of one step, causing water to endlessly flow from inside. These phase stones were primarily used to fill tubs of water for baths. When I caught up with Roffin, he gave me an all too familiar yellow phase stone. I looked it over while he explained what to do. You'll struggle to communicate with people if you don't learn how to make ordinances right. This is something everyone in every course will use, so if you don't master it, you won't even be able to take on apprentice work. Got that? Yes. I can't hear you! Yes! I replied more forcefully, earning me a grin and an approving nod. I was getting a little worried about how much longer I could keep up with Roffin's passionate teaching style. Having enough mana for the task wouldn't matter if I ended up dying from exhaustion before it even began. First, lightly tap the phase stone with your staff while pouring mana into it, he explained, demonstrating the process. I placed the phase stone on the palm of my left hand, then whipped out my staff with my right. Keeping Hersher's warning in mind, I made sure to pour in as little mana as possible. Ooh, wow! As it turned out, staffs did indeed allow me to use my mana more efficiently. While using my mana had previously felt like water pouring from a bucket, it was now like a water faucet I could adjust as will. I tapped the yellow phase stone lightly, then watched in wide-eyed amazement as it turned into a familiar white bird. It spread its wings, then dug into my arm and folded them back down. It was practically weightless. Wow, now I really am like a wizard. I could summon a tool for better controlling my mana at will, then tap a yellow stone to turn it into a white bird. At some point I had turned into a fully fledged denizen of fantasy. Oh, not bad, Ruffin explained. Now, once the ordinance opens its mouth, put your voice into it. The ordinance promptly opened its mouth, so I spoke my message. This is Rosemine, Professor Hersher. I finished making the ordinance, I said. Then I fell silent. The bird closed its mouth. I was about to move my staff to send the ordinance off to Hersher, but Roffin stopped me. He then swung his own staff like a conductor baton. If you have anything else to say, tap the ordinance beak with your staff again, and It'll open, he noted. The more you know. I nodded intrigued and tried tapping the ordinance on its beak just as Roffin had said. It opened its mouth again. How do you make the ordinance close it? All you have to do is speak. See? He said, gesturing toward the ordinance that had now closed its mouth again. Wait, what? How do I erase the message? I yelled. I didn't want my first ordinance to carry such a dumb exchange. Roffin laughed and explained I simply needed to suck the mana from the ordinance with my staff and return it to its face stone form. I did just that, then re-recorded my message. Once you've said your piece, picture the ordinance flying to Hersher, then swing your staff while pushing out your mana. And put some real oomph into it, Roffin declared. Given how much mana I had thought, I felt that wantonly giving it my all wasn't a good idea, especially considering that I was only sending the ordinance to Hersher a short distance away. I swung my staff ever so gently, sending out some mana, then watched as the ordinance flew over to Hersher. It repeated its message 3 times, just as I was used to, then returning to a message from me. Well done, the ordinance said in Hersher's voice. You may now move on to the next step. It repeated this thrice before returning to the form of a yellow face stone, which I then handed to Roffin. Nice! She can do that now. Oh, Ferdinand's gonna get those. Oh, he's gonna get to experience that. What are we doing next, I asked. Shooting mana out of your staff, Roffin exclaimed. This will allow you to use simple mana attacks, but for now you'll be focusing on shooting up a rot a red light used to call for aid. Once you've learned this, you'll be able to request help whenever something happens. Knights will come rushing to your position in an instant. With that, Roffin took out his own staff and started to demonstrate. Build up the mana in the tip of your staff like this, then push it right out of your body, he said. A fist-sized ball of light started to form at the tip of his staff, crackling and sparkling like electricity. Rot, he suddenly yelled, just as he swung his staff high in the air. A beacon of red light shot up and collided with the ceiling before fading away. Despite the impact, it didn't appear to have any marks behind. Mana can't damage buildings made with creation magic, and a rot will never pierce through one. You can go all out and use as much force as you want. Going all out is fine with me, but before I do, is this the last part of the lesson, I asked. I didn't want to expand on my mana and then have nothing left for the rest of the class. Roffin did a double take, then blinked at me in surprise. There is still another part. What, are you planning to finish the whole class in one day? Yes, is there a problem with that? I was just thinking you might want to save some of your mana. I'll hold back when casting Rot, then. Is that acceptable? Yeah, go all out, but don't put your all into it. I don't think that makes much sense. Can you really call it going all out if you're not putting your all into it? The main thing I was learning in class today was that the importance of ignoring Roffin and instead preserving my mana. I started to build up some mana in the tip of my staff, and soon enough a fist-sized ball was sitting at the end. It was steadily growing in size as more mana gathered there. Right, perfect. That's what I'm talking about. Now make it even bigger. Keep on pouring mana into your staff, Roffin yelled. I made sure to put my newfound knowledge to use and ignore him. This staff really is something else, huh? People hadn't been exaggerating when they said it was by far the most efficient tool for controlling one's mana. Using my mana precisely hadn't been easy due to how unstable it was, but now I can manipulate it so easily as I had been able to before sleeping in the Dreeve. Now let it out, Roffin. Scream Rot and blast your mana up into the sky as hard as you can. I think you mean into the ceiling. I raised my right hand into the air, then pointed the staff up with the calmly stated Rot. It seemed that I had managed my mana rather well, as a beam of red light shot directly up to the ceiling. I sighed in relief, glad to have finished the task without issue. Alright, you passed. That said, are you sure you're not running out of mana by now? Roffin asked, his concern clear on his face as he glanced around the room. She's fine. You don't know how much mana she's got. I followed his gaze and noticed that the arch nobles were already exhausted just from having spent their mana to make staffs. They weren't the only ones either. The Archduke candidates, who had been focusing on making the cooler staff, had wasted a ton of mana and were now sitting on the ground in exhaustion. Wolfried must have put in an especially good deal of effort into his. He looked absolutely drained, having not moved even an inch since I spoke to him last. It seemed the only students who were now working on the Ordnance staff were those who hadn't tried to make excessively unique staffs. Even if they seemed pretty tired, though, some had to stop before they could finish, while others dropped to the floor moments after transforming the face stone. Okay, my mana capacity really is abnormal, huh? Yeah, indeed. I closed my eyes to check how much mana I had left and found that there was still plenty in me. So, think you can handle the next step? Roffin asked. Two choices flashed in my mind. I could pretend to be exhausted to avoid standing out, or I could embrace looking abnormal to all those around me for the sake of the library. I was ashamed to have even debated my next move. Nah, I can handle it. Roffin looked at me in momentary surprise, and he gave a firm nod. Alright, being able to push your limit is all-important life skill. Let's do this. He declared, his eyes blazing with passion. This is the last part. You need to change your staff into a usable mana-filled tool. I was immediately reminded of the knights turning their staffs into weapons during combat, but first years apparently only needed to turn those knives into knives, pens, or mixing sticks. I nodded with interest as I continued to listen. Then I noticed that Hersher was coming our way. It seemed that all the students who had come to her had since given up. Hersher looked around at all the exhausted students before making an announcement. It is exceptionally important that you practice morphing your staffs. You will learn the fundamentals of magic tool brewing next year, and if you are unable to create a knife, pen, and mixing stick by then, your ability to brew will be significantly diminished. Crafting magic tools was her specialty as a professor, and upon hearing her message, all the students tightened their expressions. It seemed that the process of making magic tools included cutting the ingredients with a knife, drawing a magic circle with a pen, and then mixing everything together with mana in a cauldron using a mixing stick. I had already made a Dreeve under Ferdinand's direction, however, so I knew it was possible to brew without a staff by using magic tools. How do you morph a staff? I asked. First, begin by trying to make a knife, Hersher instructed. Take your staff and clearly visualize what you want it to morph into. I did as she instructed and took out my staff, then visualized the knife Ferdinand had used while brewing. Herschel said, "Messer," aloud, so I promptly followed suit. I watched as the staff morphed into a knife in my hand, then I looked at Herschel, who was holding a very similar-looking knife as well. "Very well done. Now say Rücken to revert its shape." I did as instructed, and just as expected, the knife turned back into a regular stab. Those around me let out odd noises. "Now repeat that process, but this time focus on making a pen and then a stirring stick," Herschel said. I ultimately had to say stylo to turn my stab into a pen, then Bayman to turn it into a mixing stick. "I never expected you to pass all the tasks on your first day. Ferdinand was the last person to have actually achieved such a feat. I suppose I should have expected nothing less from his prized disciple," Herschel said with an exasperated sigh. The other students exchanged looks of complete astonishment, then began to whisper among themselves. "Lord Ferdinand from Ehrenfest. Does she mean that?" Lord Ferdinand one asked. "Yeah, he was a famous treasure-stealing dinner player, you know. I hear his tactics were insane. Apparently our duchy only ever lost during the years he was here. The adults say we were lucky we won't have to deal with him," another replied. "Nah, he was good at more than just dinner. I'm pretty sure he was the genius who invented magic tool after magic tool. I know this because my uncle bought loads from him," a third chimed in, encouraging the others to bring up yet more rumors. "Hold on, wasn't Lord Ferdinand the battle maniac who slaughtered countless fey beasts for their materials? I heard that he demolished the high-quality stuff in the Royal Academy and then took everything left with him." "You guys must be nuts. My aunt said that he was a harpsichord player and an amazing one at that." "Well, which one's right?" "Both. All of them probably. I heard he was an Archduke candidate, an apprentice knight, and an apprentice scholar with excellent marks in every course." I couldn't help but blink in surprise as students from other duchies all shared stories about Ferdinand's impressive feats at the academy. It seemed his superhuman reputation wasn't unfounded after all. "Makes sense that Ehrenfest grades are shooting up if they have his disciple here as an Archduke candidate," one student noted. "I heard that Lord Ferdinand did multiple courses while he was here, and he got the highest grades in every single one of them." Everyone was now sharing all the legends they knew about Ferdinand, but there were so many covering such a wide range of achievements that I had to imagine some were being misattributed. Either way, it wasn't long before people started paying any attention to me at all. Whew, looks like Ferdinand was so freakishly abnormal that I'm standing out less in comparison. As the topic shifted from Ferdinand to other legendary students of the past, Herschel bent over and whispered to me, "You passed, Lady Rosemine. However, please practice morphing your stab simply by chanting the word, rather than having to pause and close your eyes to visualize the form." "Understood," I replied, wearing the dignified smile of a noblewoman. Inside, however, I was much less composed. Yes, I did! I passed all my classes. I can go to the library. I can start going to the library tomorrow. I can lock myself away in the library and read until it kills me. Praise be to the gods. And the epilogue. Ooh. Hold on. I'm going to continue. The epilogue. No sooner had Rosemine departed for the Royal Academy than Sylvester started getting a series of unsettling and downright baffling reports. In previous years, Herschel had only ever mentioned the bare minimum, usually stating that there was nothing special to report. This year, however, was very different. I mean, you sent Rosemine there, of course it's going to be different. I haven't had this kind of bad of a headache since my first Archduke conference. Curse that little problem child. The first report from the Academy came on an Earth Day before the advancement ceremony had even begun. It was from Wolfried listing Rosemine's newly picked retainers. Given the growth and diligence Wolfried had shown over the past 2 years, in addition to the current power balance between factions, Sylvester still wanted him to become the next Archduke. To that end, he had entrusted him with leading the Ehrenfest dormitory, telling him to secure as powerful a position as possible before Charlotte arrived. That likely wouldn't be too much of a challenge, assuming he was cooperating with Rosemine. Looks like he's certainly working hard. Sylvester glanced over the first report. There were a few points where Wolfried had expressed his thoughts perhaps too directly, but nothing he had written was hard to understand. Florencia and Elvira had been discussing who Rosemine should take as her retainers ever since being told she had started to wake up, and excluding Judith, the apprentice Midnight, and Feline, the apprentice Lay Noble, it seemed she had followed the recommendations to a T. "Charlotte, do you know Judith or Feline, Rosemine's new retainers?" Sylvester asked at a dinner, partially because his daughter was so desperately wanting to hear how her sibling was doing in the Royal Academy. She had dedicated herself to leading the winter playroom, so it was likely she knew at least something about them. "Judith is an apprentice knight who reveres Angelica. She declined to be my guard knight so that she could join her in serving Rosemine. I am glad her dream came true," Charlotte said with a grim smile. This was not the reaction one would expect from a member of the archducal family after being turned down by a men noble, but after relying on Rosamund to save her from a kidnapper, Charlotte's spirit was completely shattered. She had utterly failed to fill the hole her big sister left behind without outside help. And now she was borderline obsessed with Rosamund, if not also a little delusional. Sylvester was a little worried that this obsession might lead her to go off the deep end at some point in the future. Uh-oh. As for Feline, she adored my sister more than anyone in the winter playroom and put her all into collecting stories as an apprentice scholar while awaiting her return. She swore her fealty to Rosamund the very moment she could this winter. Few viewed that favorably, assuming she would not be taken as a retainer, but it seems they were wrong. In other words, they're both plenty loyal to Rosamund. Good. Sylvester was relieved, but that feeling didn't last very long. A week later, once again on Earth Day, Hersher's regular report was filled with brief and baffling messages. The girls at Ehrenfest had shockingly glossy hair at the advancement ceremony, and Lady Rosamund drew much attention due to her unique hair ornament and youthful appearance. All first years passed their written classes on the first day. The professors were discussing what manner of studying might have caught on at Ehrenfest. Lady Rosamund's original composition caught the eye of the music professors, and they have invited her to a tea party. The professor leading Hybeast's creation claimed she was attacked by Rosamund's Hybeast, no doubt due to its gremlin appearance. Please do teach me Lady Rosamund's mana compression method. I do not know how, but Lady Rosamund is now the active master of Schwartz and Weiss, the library's magic tools. It seems to be the work of the gods. You're probably not wrong about that. Lady Rosamund collapsed in the farthest hall, resulting in a squad of professors having to rescue her. Sylvester was both impressed to see Hersher write a report consisting of more than just a few single sentences and absolutely horrified by what he was reading. This is all about Rosamund. What is that little gremlin doing over there? You have no idea, dude, and who knows what's going to happen next. For the most part, he thought the events detailed in the report were understandable enough. His planned steps to boost Ehrenfest's grades and increase its influence in the Royal Academy had no doubt played some role, and Rosamund couldn't be blamed for whichever professor had been shocked by her Hybeast. Hersher had probably covered for her letting the mana compression method slip, and given how Rosamund had just awoken from the Jareve, it was easy to see why she would collapse in the farthest hall. But the gods guiding her to become the master of some magic tools in the library? That just boggled the mind. What in the friggin' world? Ferdinand, look at these reports from the Royal Academy, Sylvester said, holding out the various boards he had received. Any thoughts? Oh, I can't wait to see what Ferdinand says about all this. He had summoned Ferdinand and hoped that the reports were a coded message or something that only Hersher's former disciple was able to understand. His half-brother skimmed them, then gave a polite smile. These reports are quite brief. Even the ones I received from Wolfried contained more details. Wolfried sent you reports? Sylvester exclaimed. Why haven't I heard about this? They were questions directed to me personally, and I did not believe they were worth the ob's time, Ferdinand replied. He was speaking formally since they were presently before the art scholars, but he made his intentions perfectly clear through indicated indirect means. Sylvester smacked the table, trapped between uncertainty and frustration. Everyone except Ferdinand and Karlstadt leave the room, he ordered. The very moment the three of them were alone, Sylvester glared at Ferdinand, who in return dropped his formal smile and raised an eyebrow. Sylvester couldn't say he was particularly fond of the way his half-brother was so intent on keeping everything a secret. Wolfried had been sending me deeply flawed reports that also serve as questions on how to deal with Rosamund. I was annoyed at having to continue my days off correcting his language, but it is proof to know that even still, they are better than those you received from Hersher. Ferdinand proceeded to leave Sylvester's office and return with transcribed copies of said reports. As Sylvester read them, his hand found its way to his forehead. The only thing Wolfried said about the incident was that Rosamund had become the master of two magic tools made by royalty, but that didn't explain things any better. Still, he could tell that Wolfried had put his all into asking Ferdinand important relevant questions. Ferdinand had sent back harsh corrections, but Wolfried was staying strong and keeping at it nonetheless. One thing the reports did elaborate on, however, was how the Ehrenfest first years had passed all their classes in one go. Rosamund had apparently gone on an absolute rampage after being baited with the library. Sylvester once again glared at Ferdinand for having hidden this information from him, but even the scowl of an ob earned no more than a scoff. Is it not blindingly obvious that this is what happens when one foolishly puts other people between Rosamund and the library? Understand that I proposed forbidding her from entering the library until she passed all her classes to ensure she would be finished in time for the dedication ritual. Wolfried was a fool for not realizing this and stupidly adding on the condition that all the other first years had to pass their classes as well, Ferdinand said, wearing a cold expression as he verbally tore Wolfried apart. And to be clear, it is not easy to control Rosemind, he continued. Recall that despite entering the temple for the first time at her baptism, she charged blindly ahead to Bezenwast and offered an entire large gold for him to take her as a shrine maiden, also she could enter the temple bookroom. With the Royal Academy's library now within reach, there is absolutely nothing that could stop her. Now that you mention it, I do remember hearing about that. I guess it really wasn't an exaggeration after all. Cardstead, does that mean you weren't joking when you said Rosemind rolled out of bed while sick and literally crawled down your halls in an attempt to reach your mansion's bookroom? When did she do that? The day after, she was so excited about the bookroom she fell unconscious in the hall. That absolutely happened, Cardstead noted. Then Ferdinand shot Ferdinand a glance. A wise man advised me to keep a book on the table beside her bed to keep her contained. Yeah, very wise man. Very wise man indeed. Sylvester had originally dismissed the story as comical exaggeration, but as it turned out, it had been completely true. She was now going on a similar rampage in the Royal Academy. He didn't even want to consider what nobles from the other duchies were thinking about the matter. The first years wrapped up in her chaos have my sympathy, but Wilfrid is to blame for involving them in the first place, Ferdinand said. It is too late to back down now. I advised him to offer them his sincerest apologies. Good luck, Wilfrid. Your father's on your side. After his silent proclamation, Sylvester pointed in the most confusing board of all. But yeah, what's this all about her becoming the master of magic tools when she was registering at the library? Neither report tells me anything. Does the library have some kind of special magic tools or something? Unlike Rosemind, Sylvester did not have any abnormal obsession with the library. To him, it was nothing more than a place where documents were stored. He'd never gone there himself, since he could just have scholars bring him whatever he wanted. So he wasn't aware of any magic tools being kept there. Ferdinand, however, had often gone to the library when serving as Hersher's assistant. The tools in question are Schwartz and Weiss, Ferdinand said, tapping his temple. My understanding is that they once served archnobles assigned there by the sovereignty, so why Rosemind became their master, I do not know. Did she steal them through sheer force of mana? I cannot imagine so. From what I'm aware, they were covered in protective charms to prevent anyone from their master from even touching them. In other words, we're completely in the dark here, Karlstadt mused. He was at much a loss as Sylvester. Ferdinand alone gave an amused grin. The work of the gods, Blessings might be involved here. I cannot say for sure, and I do not know why it would work if such is indeed the case. But her becoming their master means I may now have the chance to study them. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Uh-oh, you got Ferdinand on this now. One more reason to look forward to Rosemind's return. Like teacher, like student. What a bunch of research-obsessed weirdos. I have to agree. Now Rosemind has to deal with not only Hersher wanting to examine them, but Ferdinand's going to want to do it too. How is she going to keep them both away from them? Poor Schwartz and Weiss. The first years have passed their written classes, and now all she needs to do is dedicate herself to finishing her practical classes, Ferdinand continued. I imagine she's going to hide away in the library once she is done, at which point she will have little opportunity to cause problems. That seemed likely. There were some causes for concern, but when looking at the reports as a whole, it was safe to see that Ehrenfest's grades were rising, and new trends were being started. Sylvester decided not to think too hard about the rest. Oh, I can't wait to see what the reports are going to say when they find she's already made her stamp and everything. Another week passed, and Sylvester received more headache-reducing reports from Hersher. Lady Rosemind made contact with the second prince during her dedication world class. It seemed that the prince is on guard around her due to her reputation as a saint. In order to dispel the negative rumors forming around Lady Rosemind's high beast, I am now overseeing her high beast class. Sylvester exchanged a look with Karlstadt, then immediately summoned Ferdinand before once again clearing the room. He had a feeling that Rosemind having any contact with royalty was exceedingly dangerous. I'd assumed there was nothing for us to worry about since the prince is only there for one more year, and there's only one class he shares with Rosemind. But it looks like we weren't so lucky, Sylvester said, sliding the reports over to Ferdinand. What's the plan? Ferdinand crossed his arms with an exasperated expression. There is no plan. The prince was simply interested in Rosemind's high beast. He ultimately prioritized other engagements over her, and now that Rosemind has passed her dedication world class, they will no longer have any point of contact. Our main concern here is that Rosemind has such a stunningly lack of awareness that she forgot her promise to the prince. She did what? Sylvester and Karlstadt balked, her eyes bulging as Ferdinand slid over copies of the reports he had received from Wilfrid. As it turned out, had it not been for Wilfrid, she would have just rushed straight back to the dormitory, leaving the prince in the dust. They couldn't believe it. Her priorities made no sense whatsoever. Oh no. I know. There is no use agonizing over it. Rosemine's obsession with the library cannot be fixed, Ferdinand continued. It would be a more valuable use of our time to consider how to manipulate those around her in the Royal Academy, but even that is not likely to go well. In any case, we have another matter to discuss. Wilfred is due to attend an Ehrenbach tea party. Come again? I wasn't informed of that, Sylvester exclaimed, lurching forward and snatching the report Ferdinand was holding out. A tea party like that was incredibly important, yet it hadn't received so much as a passing mention in Herscher's reports. Well, she probably didn't know about it. You should have gotten it from Wilfrid, not Herscher. A tea party between cousins, with friend Beltag's candidate joining in too. Rosemine's attempt to join was rebuffed since she's not a blood relative. For now, I advised Wilfrid to carefully consider what topics might be brought up, and discuss how to respond to them with Rosemine. Sylvester's breath caught in his throat. Wilfrid had somehow managed to win her socializing by learning how to specifically deal with members of the former Veronica faction, but who knew how he would deal with those of a higher status than him? Proper socializing in the Royal Academy starts once all the Archduke candidates and Archnobles have finished their lessons, right? Is it really safe for Wilfrid to go to a tea party with Rosemine back in Ehrenfest for the dedication ritual? Sylvester asked, earning him a dismissive look from Ferdinand. If your son is such a buffoon that he cannot handle a tea party with his own cousins, he would never survive as an Archduke. He has plenty of time to prepare. Do not interfere unless he comes seeking your counsel himself. Remember that duchies are largely forbidden from interfering in the Academy's affairs. That was the last thing Sylvester wanted to hear from the guy who was secretly responding to reports from Wilfrid. His lips curved into a frown, at which point Karlstedt gave him a few supportive pats on the shoulder. Your boy's growing up just fine. In fact, he's more reliable than you were at his age. He won't have any problems so long as he's willing to ask her advice and actually listen to it. To Sylvester, the Royal Academy had been a fun playground where adults could no longer disturb him. It had never occurred to him how much his parents might have been agonizing back home, and now as a parent himself, he was experiencing that same worry firsthand. He clenched his fist and put his heart into a single prayer. Please don't cause any more problems than you already have. Of course, his prayers went unanswered. Okay, how much more do we have left? Hold on. 51 pages. How far have I gotten recording? 52 minutes. I'll keep going. This is going to be the last part for this book. Oh, wait, wrong phone. Wrong phone. A productive Earth day. The sound of a bell rang through the darkness. Without missing a beat, I sat up and pulled aside my bed curtains. I've been waking up at first bell ever since beginning my apprentice attendant training at another house, so it came almost naturally to me now. My older sister, however, was another story. She never woke up on her own under any circumstances, and today was no exception. She showed absolutely no signs of getting up any time soon. Wonder who this is. After watching her sleeping form for a moment, I stood up and activated the light creation magic tool on my bedside table, illuminating the dark room. I then lit up a fire on the hearth so that it wouldn't be cold come changing time, and climbed back into bed. My attendant, America, and my sister's attendant, Friedel, would come to wake us up soon enough. They were both older female relatives who had finished raising their children, which made them very comfortable to be around. Oh, Laisletta and Angelica. Okay. Lady Laisletta, am I correct that you have no apprentice attendant duties today? America asked, using a green Facetone pitcher to prepare a small tub of water for me to wash my face in. I nodded. Attendants still normally worked on Earth days, even though there were no classes, but Lady Rosemine was going to be staying in her room to nurture her divine will, so I was getting a day to myself. Friedel, I would like to wear not my work clothes or my black clothes today, but rather something normal, I said. You wish to wear clothes for rest, while Lady Angelica will be wearing light armor to motivate her studies, correct? That is quite standard, she replied, preparing the outfits. We did not have a room dedicated to clothing like Lady Rosemine, so our clothes were all either in a closet placed in our room or in boxes. I was truly worried when you were taken as her retainer, America admitted while combing my hair. It was an immense relief to learn there was a double bedroom for retainers. I agreed with a smile. Archduke candidates could leave all the menial labor to others, and archnobles did largely the same, albeit with fewer retainers than they might be used to. Men nobles and lay noble students, however, could only afford to pay their servants so much. As a result, we had to sleep in shared bedrooms to minimize the amount of cleaning and bath water required, allowing us to survive with fewer attendants between us doing less work. My older sister had been Lady Rosemine's retainer since before Lady Rosemine arrived at the dormitory and announced her retainers. I was a more recent addition, meaning I had not been prepared to shoulder the cost of staying in a retainer's room by myself. Dang it. After thinking about how to best save money and lessen the load on my attendant, I decided to room with my sister. Judith and Feline were currently sharing a 2-person room for the same reason. Brunhilde and Lenore had been shocked to see us not using our right as retainers to secure individual rooms, but archnobles were given individual rooms whether they were retainers or not. So we weren't in similar positions whatsoever. It wasn't that our family was too poor to afford single rooms for the both of us, but we would have needed time to make preparations. I suppose I'm going to have my own room regardless after Angelica graduates this year. You will do just fine in your own room, Lady Laisletta. You are an excellent retainer who any Archduke candidate would wish to have. Lady Angelica often fails to properly communicate with her attendants, and I was quite fearful of serving her here alone. It truly is a relief that you are here with her, my lady. I could not help but smile. Attendants could not do their jobs unless they were kept up to date, and Friedel was informed of Angelica's plans only when I conveyed Riarda's and Cornelius's reports to her. Surely would have been thought of as incompetent among the attendants had I not elected to live with my sister. I still cannot believe Lady Rosamund values Lady Angelica so much as a retainer, Friedel mused aloud. America nodded firmly in agreement, then held out a hand to help me stand up. My chair was repositioned and my socks repaired, and it was as I was putting them on that I recalled the fuss my parents had made. Though it was quite a stir, my sister was chosen to serve as Lady Rosamund's apprentice. No, it wasn't there. Of course there was, Friedel replied. Lady Angelica is hardly considerate of anyone else, and as she chose to be a knight, not an attendant, whoever would have thought she would be capable of serving the Archducal family without causing any problems. It was not unusual for female attendants to be replaced after giving birth, which meant it was inevitable that Lady Florencia, who had taken only female attendants, would need to take on someone new. When the time came, she had wished to avoid taking in a retainer with close bonds to Lady Veronica, and so she invited my mother to serve her. It had been very significant that she kept her distance from Lady Veronica somewhat while my father served the previous Ob. Lord Cardstead, impressed with the diligence of my parents, had taken Angelica to serve as Lady Rosamund's apprentice guard knight. My parents surely would have indirectly refused had they been consulted in the matter in advance, but he had gone straight to Angelica, who then agreed on the spot. I thought everything was over when Lady Angelica failed her final exam and was told to take supplementary lessons, Friedel continued while shaking her head. Needing supplementary lessons was in itself cause for one to become a laughingstock in noble society, and if Angelica had been relieved of guard duty as well, she surely would have lost all hope of ever finding a proper partner. Once more, she had only been selected to serve as an apprentice guard knight due to the trust my parents had earned themselves for being relieved of duty. Her being relieved of duty would suggest that the Archducal couple and the Knight Commander had misplaced their trust in our family. No one of any notable status would want us as retainers, and we'd all most likely struggle to find employment and get married. It truly was a frightening time for us. Angelica, meanwhile, showed no concern over being required to take supplementary lessons. In fact, at one point, it seemed as though she might fail to graduate entirely. Those who failed to graduate from the Royal Academy were not considered nobles in the eyes of society, meaning her stamp would have been sealed, and she would have been reduced to serving our family as a lowly servant. Ooh, that would have been bad. Even so, Lady Rosamund kept her as a retainer and even helped organize a study group to ensure she passed her supplementary classes. She had saved not only my sister, but our entire family. There truly was no end to the gratitude I felt for her. Even my sister is motivated to study with Lady Rosamund here at the Royal Academy. She is not the same woman she was last year, I noted. Emerica nodded. She must be glad to have been afforded this opportunity in her final year. If only she and Lady Rosamund had been in the same grade from the start, Friedel said with a wistful sigh, we would have all had a much easier time. I adjusted my skirt while the two attendants shared a laugh. Once I was ready, it was time for my sister to wake up. Friedel was the first to act. Do wake up, Lady Angelica. Lady Laisletta has finished getting ready. But there aren't any classes to go to, and we've got no work today, Angelica murmured, hugging her blanket and turning away, her silky blue hair flowing behind her. She was just as beautiful and enchanting as ever, but also just as unladylike. Friedel sighed with exasperation as I stepped forward to try next. Sister, you have dinner practice in the morning, even on your days off, do you not? Please remember that Cornelius has said you cannot participate in practice if you do not finish your studying first. I understand that you are finding it a struggle, but Lady Rosamund will be disappointed if you do not try your best nonetheless. Oh, right. I have to study in the morning. I have to study even though I don't have class, Angelica groaned in a sleepy voice as she started to move. It took her some time to get moving at first, but once she was up and moving around, things went a lot quicker. She would manage just fine without me now. Later, she said, rubbing the sleep from her blue eyes, I'll get changed to study, so you go ask Riarda how Lady Rosemine's doing. It still came as somewhat of a surprise that study and Lady Rosemine were among Angelica's first words upon waking up. Last year, she had studied only when Cornelius cornered her in the common room, but now she would study alone in her room. That said, the willingness likely only stemmed from the fact she was forbidden from serving as a guard until she passed her written classes. Lady Rosemine's presence truly does make an enormous difference. Certainly, I replied. May our partings be brief. I exited the room, entrusting Angelica's morning preparation to Frida and Emrica. I cut down the hallway, knocked lightly on the door where the other retainers were gathered, then opened it as silently as possible. Good morning, Riarda. How's Lady Rosemine? I asked. Riarda passed midway through refilling some tea leaves and looked at the door leading to Rosemine's room. I checked up on her a moment ago, and it seems the potion she drank last night has made her all better. She could be right as rain after a full day spent resting in bed. Yesterday, Lady Rosemine had gone to the farthest hall to gather her divine will, only to fall unconscious on her way back. She had returned on her high beast, moving much slower than usual, and was then left exclusively in Riarda's care to minimize the risk of the divine will being contaminated. We were all strictly forbidden from going near Lady Rosemine until she had finished absorbing the divine will into her. I was just so worried since I had never heard of anyone losing consciousness in the farthest hall before. Cornelius and Hartman were particularly concerned at dinner last night, as neither of them were allowed up to the third floor. Even my sister mentioned Lady Rosemine almost immediately after she awoke. Inform them about her recovery at breakfast. I have work to do here while Lady Rosemine is absorbing her divine will. I returned to my room and studied with Angelica until second bell, then left for breakfast. Angelica had somehow managed to finish everything she needed to do before practice, so she stepped into the hallway with a lively expression. Ahead of us, where we could see Judith, her fluffy orange hair bouncing as she walked. Good morning, Judith. How is Feline? I asked. Good morning to you both. Feline is still stuck in her room to prevent anyone from touching her. I understand how important it is, but I still felt lonely this morning without anyone to talk to. I couldn't wait for second bell. Judith had been raised alongside several brothers, so she was used to every morning being busy. We chatted as we entered the dining hall, where Hartman greeted us with a soft smile. Laisletta, how is Lady Rosemine doing? She's doing much better now. I'm told she will be fine after a day of rest. Good to hear. I really wasn't sure what to think. I never heard of anyone collapsing in the farthest hall before. Hopefully it doesn't mess with her stap. Both Cornelius and Hartmut sided with relief when I relayed Riarda's message. Cornelius was Rosemine's blood-related older sister, so it was only natural that he would be so visibly distraught, even in the dining hall. Hartmut, meanwhile, had only become her retainer after she entered the Royal Academy, yet his dedication to Lady Rosemine as an individual far surpassed almost anyone else's. I am grateful for Lady Rosemine saving my sister and family, but what drives Hartmut's abnormal dedication, I wonder? He says that anyone would feel the same if they understood the glory of the Saint of Ehrenfest, but I am afraid to say I don't quite understand it all. Rosemine once collapsed just from walking through our estate to get to the bookroom, Cornelius said. As retainers, we should have been more worried about the farthest hall, since everyone has to walk all the way back on their own. His wisdom was well and true. I needed to be more careful with Lady Rosemine as well. My, Brunhilde said, entering the dining hall with Leonora and sitting down with us. It seemed to have already been updated on Lady Rosemine. I could guess they had just gone to the room for retainers and spoken with Riarda as well. With all the retainers now gathered, our food was served. So, seeing as we all have today off, what are everyone's plans? Cornelius asked. We took turns going out and giving our answers. I am attending a tea party this morning to exchange information, Brunhilde said. We are all relatively in the dark about the first-year Archduke candidates of other duchies, are we not? Thankfully, the apprentice arch attendants who serve them are also going to be present. I have been instructed to attend with Isidore, one of Lord Wilfrid's apprentice attendants. Yeah, I've got a gathering of apprentice arch scholars to attend. Do the guard knights have anything like that? Hartmut asked. He and Brunhilde were going to be fulfilling their roles as archnobles by exchanging information with those of other duchies. Cornelius answered on behalf of the guard knights. We have dinner practice this morning. There won't be many opportunities for us to practice once Rosemine starts holding up in the library, since one of us is going to be stuck in there accompanying her. So, Angelica, did you finish in time? I did everything you told me to, Cornelius. I can come, she replied. Cornelius looked my way for confirmation. I nodded, having observed her valiant efforts before breakfast. All right, Cornelius said. Looks like Angelica, Lenore, Traga, and I will be practicing today. Wait a second, Cornelius. I want to join in too, Judith declared, launching a fist into the air. But Cornelius merely crossed his shoulders and frowned. Across his arms and frowned. Crossed his shoulders, can't cross your shoulders. You're not in the night course yet, remember? You're a second year. Plus, you haven't finished most of your classes since you're focusing on getting the highest grade you can. You should use this time to study instead. But I can't practice most days because of classes. I want to join you guys at least once. I'll get all stiff otherwise. Judith had trained with the Knights almost every day in her home province of Kernberger, but as a second year, her time was spent attending common classes. Compared to the third years and above who specialized in the Knights course, she had overwhelmingly less training and experience. I understand how you feel, but as an Archduke candidate's retainer, it's more important for your future to pass with excellent grades than to pass with the bare minimum, Leonora explained, brushing her magenta hair from her shoulders and regarding Judith with intelligent blue eyes. This isn't so much the case for archnobles, but men nobles and lay nobles must face the jealousy of all those who hope to take that position, she continued. Securing high grades is essential to avoid and lessen that jealousy. The only way to protect your position is to make those around you understand that you were selected out of all the other men nobles for a good reason. Her explanation complete, Lenore then turned to me, no doubt signaling that as a men noble, the same held true for me. She was correct, but there were a few rare exceptions. In Angelica's case, she had secured her position not through good grades, but by surviving Lord Boniface's training and accomplishing the awe-inspiring feat of earning his respect. If we need high grades to protect ourselves, why does that mean for Feline? She's a lay noble, and she's just barely passing history and geography, Judith asked, her eyes wavering with concern. It is unfortunate, but I imagine she will be struggling greatly whenever she's not in Lady Rosemine's sight, Lenore replied coldly. I understand that she had no choice as a lay noble. If she had elected to fail the exams to achieve better grades, not only would she have earned the ire of all the others' first years in the dormitory, but she would have also delayed Lady Rosemine's entry to the library. The adults in Ehrenfest will care not for such details, however. Lenore sighed, then glanced over at the table where Wolfried's attendants were eating. Wolfried himself was not there, but a mutter directed at him escaped her nonetheless. What were you thinking? Do you even realize what you've done? I thank you ever so much for the advice, Lenore. I will try to earn the best grades I possibly can, Judith said, understanding Lenore's point and resolving to study even harder. And how will you be spending the day, Brunhilde asked, glancing my way. I believe I will take Judith's lead and study so that I may pass my classes as soon as possible, with the best grades possible. We will need many retainers on standby to accommodate Lady Rosemine's library needs, no? Once breakfast was over, we saw off the apprentice knights and headed to the common room to study. Thanks to Lady Rosemine having established the Better Grades Committee, an organization which split everyone according to their courses and enforced the sharing of study materials, I now had more people to study with, and it was easier to ask others for help. I saw Judith leave for another table likely to study with other second years. In my opinion, it was truly admirable that Lady Rosemine had created a situation where we could all work together regardless of our factions. Leslie, you certainly are throwing yourself at your studies today. Is today not your one and only day off while Lady Rosemine's absorbing her stone? Catherine asked. She was a third-year apprentice attendant set to serve Lady Charlotte, and she had been practicing at the home of an attendant who previously served Lady Florencia until the end of autumn. It is, Catherine, but I cannot risk getting grades unbefitting one chosen to be Lady Rosemine's retainer. I also hope to finish my written lessons as soon as reasonably possible so that I can accompany her to the library. Lady Rosemine was more forceful than I anticipated. Even Troggett's taken aback. I simply cannot believe how she treated the first years. Had the one I served likewise ordered me to pass my classes on the first day no matter what, I surely would have frozen in shock and failed to achieve anything at all. The fearsome might Lady Rosemine had unleashed upon the first years while driving them to pass came as a massive surprise to those who had seen her in the winter playroom. There, she had simply read the thick books to herself, read aloud from picture books, and asked everyone to work together despite their factions. There was more than a few students who took the sudden change as her abusing her authority as an Archduke candidate to act like a tyrant. While using the library was one of the main reasons Lady Rosemine came to the Royal Academy, I must say, though, I am quite looking forward to accompanying her there, I said furtively, lowering my voice a little. Catherine's eyes widened. You never seemed interested in the library before, Lesletta, she replied, eyeing me carefully. After accompanying Lady Rosemine there for the registration process, I know exactly what awaits me, I said, giggling to myself as I recalled the shoe mills. My words caught the attention of not just Catherine, but the other nearby apprentice attendants as well. Do you recall my mentioning that there are 2 large shoe mills, that's to say, 2 large magic tools in the library, and that Lady Rosemine became their master? They are named Schwartz and Weiss, and once I have finished my written lessons, I plan to begin designing outfits for them. Outfits for the shoe mills? Indeed, Lady Rosamond was told that as their new master, it was her duty to award them with new clothes. I want nothing more than to help with that process, I said. The shoe mills we raised at home could neither walk nor talk, but the two large ones helping Professor Solange in the library not only spoke, but they also walked on two legs. One was black and the other was white, and they were both much too cute. Goodness, seeing Schwartz and Weiss give their tour while wearing matching outfits was just so adorable, I gushed. I would like to see these library shoe mills, Catherine said. I raise shoe mills of my own back home. Just how large are they? They aren't quite as tall as Lady Rosamond, but they do come close if you count their ears. They act according to Lady Rosamond's instructions, and they are capable of speech as well. It is quite stilted speech, mind you, but that just makes them even more cuter in my eyes. As I spoke at length about Schwartz and Weiss, I noticed the other girls who raised shoe mills at home started exchanging glances. I think I might visit the library as well, Catherine murmured, drawing everyone's attention. To secure study materials, of course. There are less resources for the attendant courses than for the Knights course, you see. She looked around with worry, attempting to recover the situation with a polite laugh. But it seemed everyone else was just as eager. You are quite right, Catherine, one girl noted. Do take me with you when you go to the library. I would like to see these other resources myself. I wish to accompany you as well, added another. I too must search for more new resources. It seems that Lady Rosamond is already working with the first years to make new study resources for next year. As her retainer, I believe it necessary that I follow her example, I said. With that, we headed to the library to see the shoe mills. Or rather, to search for resources for the attendant course. We found the two shoe mills organizing the bookshelves, their heads swaying from side to side as they moved around. Oh my, one girl started to stammer. How... I chuckled at her reaction. Adorable, are they not? Do you not wish to help make new clothes for them? How shall we dress them? I imagine another matching set would look lovely. Stay strong, everyone. We came here for study resources, remember? Catherine whispered, stopping us in our tracks. You said that the magic tools help with library work, correct? I suggest we ask them where we might find resources for the attendant course. There's nothing wrong with us approaching them in that end. Brilliant, Catherine. We approached Schwartz, asked where the attendant course resources were, then ogled the two shoe mills as they began looking for books. From a distance we could see there were a few professors in the reading room, seemingly asking Professor Solange about the circumstances behind Schwartz and Weiss moving around. I see the professors are interested in Schwartz and Weiss as well, Catherine said. Professor Herscher raced over as soon as she heard the news, I replied. I believe she said something about magic tools that can walk and talk, on their own being extremely rare. We took our time picking out resources, all the while watching Schwartz and Weiss, and it was only when the light signaling for us to leave the library snapped us back to our senses that we realized none of us had actually brought deposits with us to take out any books. Fourth bell rang a moment later, and we all returned to the dormitory. It was unfortunate that we had been unable to borrow any resources, but we used the walk back to discuss just how cute Schwartz and Weiss were, and what manner of clothing we could dress them in. I thought about it over lunch, and I am convinced that dressing them in separate colors is for the best, Catherine declared immediately after lunch. She had drawn up an illustration detailing her ideal outfits for the shoe mills, which caused her enthusiasm to spread through the common room. Should the clothes not be black, considering that they work within the Royal Academy, I asked. Surely you recall that the black shoe mill wore a white dress. Any color must be fine. Even girls who hadn't been in the common room that morning soon became interested in our discussion. What are them? One asked, gesturing toward the illustrations. Those who were already visiting the library told the unaware girls about the two shoe mills, explained that they were magic tools, then responded on her almost indescribable cuteness. And so we are in the middle of deciding new clothes for them, I concluded. Do you have any ideas? Soon enough we were pondering the issue alongside even girls of other factions. At some point a few apprentice scholars joined the mix as well. It is nice to see you all so enthusiastic, but is it not Lady Rosamond's job to prepare clothes for Schwartz and Weiss? Is it truly acceptable to advance this discussion without her? Brunhilde asked out of nowhere. Everyone immediately fell silent, the laughter dying away on our lips as we looked in our direction. I attempted to break the uncomfortable air with a smile. We know, Brunhilde, but Lady Rosamond is absent today. Can we not have a single day to discuss what clothes would suit Schwartz and Weiss and what we would like to make for them? Please do keep this a secret from her. Brunhilde fell into thought for a moment, looking over me and everyone else, then smiled and tapped a finger to Catherine's illustration. Their new master is an Archduke candidate from Ehrenfest, you know. Shall we adorn them with the flowers needed to decorate hairpins, she suggested, contributing to the discussion rather than instructing us to disperse. We all exchanged smiles of mutual agreement, introducing to their clothing the Ehrenfest fashion towards Lady Rosamond Trends Lady Rosamond had invented was a truly splendid idea. We soon had an abundance of amazing suggestions. If we are to use flower decorations, perhaps we should also copy Lady Rosamond's skirt? Rather than having them both dressed as girls, would it not be wonderful to have one wear boys' clothing? The white shoe mill can be adorned with cute lace, while the black one can wear a sharp, cool-looking uniform. I think we should make their clothes match Lady Rosamond's outfit. Brunhilde's dramatic arrival had only accelerated the discussion. Ideas were spreading around like group like wildfire, and each one improved upon the last. In the end, however, we ended up too absorbed in our conversation. Not one of us noticed when Lady Rosamond entered the common room, so when she suddenly asked what we were all doing, it shocked us so much that I almost jumped out of my skin. I scrambled to flip the illustration so that Lady Rosamond would not see it. Is it something you do not want me to see? She asked. No, Lady Rosamond, we just feel a bit uncomfortable having gotten so festive without you. There is not much more to it than that, Brunhilde said with a troubled smile. Schwartz and Weiss are simply too adorable. We began discussing what fashion of clothing you might prepare for them. Do forgive us for getting ahead of ourselves in your absence, I added. Brunhilde and I stepped forward, taking full responsibility as retainers so that the others would not be blamed. Lady Rosamond then asked to see the designs we came up with, and the hopeful glint in her eyes precluded my refusal. I showed her the finalized illustration Catherine had drawn while explaining our thought process. It wasn't long before Angelica, who had arrived with Lady Rosamond, chimed in as well. Laisletta has always loved cute things to death. She even dresses up our pet shoe mills at home with clothes that she makes herself. Sister, I exclaimed. It was true that I had put more enthusiasm than was perhaps necessary into my explanation, since Lady Rosamond seemed to be enjoying it, but I did not believe it was proper to disclose such personal details about a retainer in front of the other one they served. As an attendant, I needed to remain clear-headed at all times, and yet I had been so absorbed in our conversation that I did not even notice Lady Rosamond enter. To make matters worse, I had also failed to include her in the discussion, even though she was the master of the two shoe mills in the first place. I could feel the blood drain from my face. If these transgressions resulted in me being relieved of duty, my family would not only be wailing in agony once again. Mother, father, please forgive me. As I silently begged my parents for forgiveness, Lady Rosamond curiously tilted her head at me. I remembered her mentioning that someone had once praised her as looking like an adorable shoe mill, and with her golden eyes and flowing dark blue hair reminded me of the ones I raised back home. I wholeheartedly agreed. I will only be able to enter the library once I have passed my classes, Laisletta. If you have finished your written classes by then, I would not mind you coming with me to measure Schwartz and Weiss. Truly, Lady Rosamond? It would be much more enjoyable if we all think of designs together. Would anyone else like to join us? Everyone who had been working with us for the designs agreed to come with us. Those who hadn't gone to the library in the morning looked like they were dying with excitement to go. In that case, I recommend you all finish your written lessons before my practical lessons conclude. It is always hard to focus on your studying when there are more exciting matters to tempt you, Lady Rosamond said. Indeed, we shall do our best. We had finalized our own ideas for the designs, and from this point onward we were prioritizing Lady Rosamond's views. It was a perfect opportunity to shift our excitement from clothing to studying. Lady Rosamond is passing lesson after lesson with tremendous speed. We will not finish our own in time without serious effort. First years have only a few classes, but we seniors have many more. Indeed, let us do all we can. I want nothing more than for us to all measure the shoe mills together. And so we Ehrenfest girls all started studying together, our heads and our hearts and souls united with this desire to measure Schwartz and Weiss. I looked around the common room, which was now much quieter as everyone threw themselves into their studies, and found myself moved by how much more focused people were. Lady Rosamond truly does excel at driving us to study. Oh, here we go. Wait. Whoa. Okay, let's see what happened. Okay, this is probably for, mine's family's point of view. Mine awakens. Ooh, that was heavy, Camille said, setting his carrying basket down on the table with a thump. Today was market day, and we had gone to buy meat for winter preparation. I set the things I had bought onto the table as well, then looked at my son, who was now resting on the floor. Okay, this is Effa's point of view. Okay. Time for the next step, Camille. Could you fetch the salt for me, I asked. We needed to get the base preparations done, since pig killing day was coming fast. Camille frowned and grumbled about being tired, but he stood right up and went to the storage room. I chuckled to myself as he went. At this rate, he'll be ready to go by spring. Camille had been begging me to let him go to the forest, most likely because there had been so many other kids his age going there for winter preparation. But I feared he didn't have the stamina to handle the trip, or the strength to make it back with the older kids before the gates closed. Are we doing this whole mine again thing? Because mine was dealing with that too. Right now, I was testing him by sending him to the market and on errands to the east gate where Gunter worked. Okay, I took out a somewhat large board, covered it with cloth, and started setting some meat on top of it while Camille came back with a bag full of salt. The sight reminded me of the time mine had found the salt much too heavy to carry. She had ended up crying to Thule, asking her to help with tearful eyes. Camille didn't really look like mine, but his similarly colored hair and eyes meant I often thought about her when I looked at him. Has mine woken up yet, I wonder? We're currently keeping ourselves going by believing in the letters Les occasionally brought to us, which said she was still alive. We had gone on quite a while without any updates until we finally received good news in the middle of autumn. It was around the time Let's had gotten back from a trip to some distant city. Looks like there are some signs of change popping up. It'll still be some time before she wakes up, but it's progress, he had said. The good news had warmed my heart amid all the busyness bearing down on me, but then a whole month passed before I knew it the end of autumn was on the horizon. It had been almost 2 years since the winter mine was poisoned. I hate the winter. The more blizzards keep me stuck inside, the more bad thoughts I have. I can't believe it's this time again already. I played back the memory of when Lutz had read that terrible letter aloud, and my heart twinged with the same pain that had washed over me when I was told mine had been poisoned. I just hope she wakes up before winter, I muttered to myself with a sigh. Huh? Mom, did you say something? Camille asked, looking up at me. Oh, Camille. I smiled and held out the water jug. It's nothing. Go wash your hands. We need to start rubbing salt on the meat. Okay, I'm excited for Pig Day. Pale Killing Day was something of a small festival. All the kids looked forward to it, mostly because we got so much food. Mine had always gotten sick around this time of year, as she would pull a face whenever the occasion was mentioned. But Camille would immediately gaze up with renewed enthusiasm, even when he had just complained about being tired. We bundled up the salted meat, took it to the winter storage closet in our storage room, then started preparing dinner. Gunter was on afternoon duty today, so he wouldn't be getting back until after the gates closed. Are we steaming the bird with wine? Camille asked. Dad said that's his favorite. No, we're cooking with herbs this time. The salt needs to rest a day before we can steam the bird with wine, I replied while preparing the herbs. It was then that someone suddenly started pounding on the front door. No sooner had Camille and I exchanged worried glances than we heard a familiar voice from the other side. Mom, Camille, open the door. It's me, Thule. What, Thule? I asked aloud. She usually only came home on Fruit Day afternoons or Earth Day mornings. On top of that, she had completely mastered the etiquette the Gilberta Company was teaching her, such that she always acted gracefully and polite even when at home with us. She never pounded on the door or yelled. I opened the door in confusion, and in raced not just Thule, but Lutz as well. Given how much they were gasping for air, I could guess they had sprinted all the way up the stairs. What happened, you two? I asked. Don't you have work today? We do, but Lutz came to see me, and they said that I could go home for today. Lutz can tell you why. I can barely breathe, Thule gasped. Camille rushed over and gave her a cup of water so she rubbed her throat. She gulped it all down before casually wiping her mouth. Her usual elegance was absolutely nowhere to be seen. Thanks, Camille. Give some to Lutz as well. Okay, here you go, Lutz. Lutz accepted the cup with a thank you, gave Camille's dark blue hair a quick tussle, then downed the drink in one go. Camille responded with a broad smile. He liked Lutz a lot, since Lutz was always the one who brought him new picture books. Aww, that's so cute. So what happened then? I asked while watching Camille celebrate. Lutz looked at me with a wide grin. Mine woke up yesterday, he announced. My eyes widened. This was the very news I had been hoping to receive for quite some time now. Thule, meanwhile, clapped her hands together in excitement. I knew it was going to happen sooner or later, she said, but something about the whole situation just didn't feel real to me. I had been hoping that she would wake up before winter, but not once had I thought it might actually happen. Hold on. Maybe I'm asleep and this is just a dream. I couldn't help my skepticism. I mean, I had already witnessed countless dreams in which mine woke up. Happy dreams when the whole family jumped for joy at Lutz's message. The fact that Gunter wasn't back and things weren't as good as they could have been made it feel more realistic, at least. As a waver between thinking this was a dream and accepting it as reality, Thule and Lutz excitedly talked among themselves. Lutz, when are you going to go see mine? Thule asked, a noticeable glimmer in her blue eyes. Lutz rubbed his nose with a proud smile. I got word from Gil this morning, and we had a meeting this afternoon. Huh? You've already seen her, Lutz? No fair! I thought we all found out together, Thule complained, puffing at her cheeks. Lutz shrugged at her, but there was still an overjoyed smile spread across his face. Hey, it caught me off guard, too. Seems like she's moving to the Nobles' Quarter tomorrow or the day after, and they wanted to have a work meeting before that happened. Lutz met her. Mine? I was still struggling to process their conversation, and for some reason my heart was pounding harder than ever. It felt like things were gradually snapping into place, and the dream was becoming reality. Was mine okay, Thule asked? Remember how we talked about how crazy it would be if she got super tall while she was asleep and came out looking like a totally different person? Did that happen? Les laughed and shook his head. Not at all. She's better now, but she looks and acts exactly the same. I kinda couldn't believe how tiny she is, but she certainly seemed to be self-conscious about it. She cried about how she wanted to get tall. Mine cried? Mine had never cried in any of my dreams. She always wore pleasant smiles and waved, apologizing for worrying us for being happy to be healthy again. Oh, well, mine's always been uncomfortable how tiny she is, and I hate to say this, knowing she cried about it, but I'm super relieved to hear that she's the same mine I remember. I feel the same way. I agreed with Thule without noticing it. I was very glad that my daughter was the same as I remembered. So do you think she'll order a new hairpin, Thule asked? Who knows? But I've got plant paper, ink, and new stationery ready. No matter what she needs, I'm prepared. Act as smug as you want. It doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I've made so many hairpins for mine over the past year in preparation for when she wakes up, Thule said, puffing out her chest. Let's grinned at her, and she smiled back in return. This never happened in any of my dreams. My dreams always ended not long after the news came. I would always wake up in the dark inside of myself, but now it was progressing beyond Lutz and Thule's initial celebration as it started talking about the future. About more practical things. It was then that I finally accepted this was real, that mine really had woken up, and tears began welling up in my eyes. I'm so glad this isn't a dream. Mine really did wake up, I said aloud. Mom? It had been a long 2 years, a very, very long 2 years. Sometimes I had worried that she would never wake up. Other times I wondered whether the nobles were just hiding the fact she was dead. My fears were unfounded. Mine had woken up, the strength drained from my body replaced with joy and relief. Thank goodness, mine. Thank goodness. Oh, Camille looks so cute! Camille blinked his golden brown eyes and looked around at us, confused to see our tears. He then asked a question that pulled me back to my senses like being doused with cold water. Who's mine? Oh. How are they going to explain this to him? Because they can't say that mine is his sister, because then he'll go around telling everyone that mine is awake. Because that's what he heard. And then everybody's going to have to explain to him that no, mine's dead. Oh, what are they going to do? Thule, Lutz, and I all frowned at each other. We hadn't been talking about mine much so that our neighbors wouldn't press for details, and we didn't really talk about her being asleep, so it would always make us depressed. But the fact that Camille outright didn't know who she was blew me away. How should we explain this to him? Camille would turn 4 when spring came. He was at the age where he would tell people everything he knew and ask everyone about everything they knew. We couldn't risk him talking about mine to the neighbors. I wiped my tears away and started to think things over. I would need to speak to Gunter about what we'd say to him. We could talk about this after dinner, once Gunter gets back. Thule, you're happy to help with dinner, right? Could you and Camille get the potato fulls and Rania's from the storage room? Let's make this fancy since you're back. And thanks for coming all this way for us. I mean, they could say that mine is a nickname for Rosemine. Thule's the one that Thule gets her hairpins for. Or the one that Thule makes the hairpins for, and that she had been sick. That's what they could do, because they did say that mine was going to be a nickname in case anybody messed up. I plugged my purse off the shelf as I walked Lutz to the door. Then once I had confirmed that Thule and Camille were gone, I slipped a small silver into Lutz's hand. I'm really sorry about this, but could you go ask Gunter to stay out drinking until the time Camille usually falls asleep, I asked. Lutz shot an awkward glance at the storage room. Sorry, Mrs. Effa, don't apologize. I'm very thankful you came to tell us. It's our fault that not thinking about Camille properly. You can tell Gunter the news. Lutz nodded, then turned around and hurried down the stairs. Is Dad not back yet? Camille asked. I hope he gets back soon. Why don't we just go ahead and eat now? Thule asked. I'm starving here and Dad's super late. Agreed, I said. He's probably at the bar and I can't wait any longer. Let's start without him. Thule, how's your work been lately? We finished preparing for dinner while blatantly avoiding talking about mine, then started eating. Camille sadly looked over at the door before joining us. He was hungry too and wasn't aware for Gunter to come home late after drinking. Once we had finished dinner, Camille leaped forward, excited to sleep next to Thule excited to sleep next to Thule for the first time in a while. I chatted for a short while beneath the covers, but it wasn't long before Camille was fast asleep. In all honesty, I was relieved that he had fallen asleep before Gunter got back. It probably helped that he was tired from walking to the market, carrying things about, and preparing for pig killing day. At 7 fell, the front door quietly opened. Gunter was back. Welcome home, dear. I heard it all from Lutz. About mine and Camille. Gunter removed his coat and put it aside while Thule poured tea for everyone. We picked up our cups and collectively sighed. As his father, I want to tell him the truth, but how would we even do that? Gunter asked with a sigh after drinking some tea. I can't believe Camille still doesn't know mine. I said, I want to tell him who she is since they're with family, but the story is that nobles took her away and she died. Wouldn't he just get confused if we tell him the truth and call it a family secret? I'm less worried about him being confused and more worried about him telling everyone what he heard without really getting why it's important, Thule replied, turning her blue eyes to Gunter. I'm absolutely against telling Camille the truth. We don't know what he'll do. Our best option here is to tell him what everyone else knows. My eyes fell to my cup. Thule had a point, but the hardness in her voice made it seem like she really didn't care about Camille in this situation. You and Lutz kept secrets when you were just old enough to be baptized, didn't you? Gunter said. We didn't have to tell him right away. We can wait until after he's been baptized. He'll surely understand then, and he wouldn't just tell people our family secrets. Thule pursed her lips and shook her head, rejecting Gunter's compromise. No, Dad. Words won't be enough to explain how dangerous my situation is, and why he can't tell people about her no matter what. He won't ever get it. Thule, I asked, who was being strangely obstinate for some reason. Before I knew it, she lowered her head, tears were welling up in her eyes and dripping down onto the table. Oh, she wants to tell him, but she can't. She told me not to come to the temple because it was dangerous, but I didn't get it. I didn't understand, she sobbed. I thought I needed to protect her since she's my little sister. I thought I was supposed to protect her from danger, and it's my fault she's stuck where she is now. No, it's not your fault. This would have happened whether you were there or not. No, Thule, Gunter said, starting to comfort her. That wasn't your fault. How many times have I told you this? He had said it more times than I can remember, but Thule never seemed to agree with him. There had been times where it seemed like he had gotten through to her, but in the end the regret still weighed on her heart. Gunter and I glanced at each other, at which point Thule wiped away her tears and looked up at us. I just wanted to protect mine, she said, but all I ended up doing was making things worse for her. It was because we were there, because our own actions caused us much damage, that Lutz and I know how important secrets are. Camille won't understand. He hasn't gone through that. Even if we do explain this all to him, how can we be sure he'll grasp how serious it is? He's family, but that doesn't fix the problem. Thule's words had weight to them, but above all else, she was right. She and Lutz hadn't known to keep secrets just because they were old enough to have been baptized. They knew from experience keeping secrets, whether they liked it or not, because they knew they had to. You're right, Thule. Camille doesn't have the context or the life experience he needs to understand the situation, so he could put us all in danger, I said. And mine would desperately try to save us, wouldn't she? Gunter nodded. Yeah, mine put her all into protecting Haas and the Grey Priest. If anything happened, she'd do everything in her power to try and save us. Mine would try and save us no matter what, even if doing so put her in a bad situation or meant breaking the contract that stopped us from calling each other family. Considering that she wanted to stay connected with us in any way she could, even after becoming a noble to save our lives, it wasn't hard to see what lengths she would go to. We can't put mine in danger when she'd do anything to protect us. We have to wait until Camille comes of age. No. Until Camille figures things out on his own, Gunter decided, earning him an agreement with agreeing not from Thule. That's fine with me, but how do we explain Thule and Lutz being so overjoyed earlier today, I asked. It all depends on how much Camille remembers, but we can just frame it as part of the story about mine getting killed by nobles. Let's see. Thule and Lutz were happy because they found something of mine she left at the Gilberta Company, Gunter suggested, putting an old but familiar-looking hairpin out of his pocket. The yellow flowers were rather dirty from being handled so much, and the red flowers were faded. I remember that one. It's the hairpin I made right after mine became a noble. I based it on the design mine described in a letter she wrote, and slipped it into a book she printed. Thule said, her eyes watering as she poked at the hairpin. It was completely different from the more complex one she made now, serving as a reminder that she really had gotten a lot better. Lutz got it from Otto. They were keeping it in their workshop to use as an example, but they've got so many experts now they don't need it anymore. She'd be perfect for the whole Camille situation. It's old and dried up now that it's been used as an example for years. It's perfect to say mine used to own it, Thule said, glancing over at the bedroom where Camille was asleep with a tearful smile. Gunter looked over as well, his eyes just as watery. Then I did the same. We were making a big secret in our family, and I couldn't help but feel terrible. I suppose we can't talk about mine anymore, even at home, I whispered. Thule spun back around to look at me, her face scrunched up in pain, but after a moment she nodded too. Yeah, the only way you're going to be able to talk about her now is if you're saying Rose mine and not mine. And just say that she's a noble. Ooh, we got a map, we got a map. We got maps. And the afterword. What the heck is this? A comfy life with my family. End of volume bonuses. Let's do this. Pass in one go. Okay, that's Charlotte. This will be the I'll protect you no matter what. So cute. Calcium, I need more calcium. No, that's not how it goes. You're my little sister. I'm gonna protect you. Oh, she needs more calcium to grow bigger. Okay. You got mail. Oh, here we go. Dorm supervisor in the Royal Academy. I have to not only guide their students, but also send regular reports on their work and grades to their duchy's archduke. Nothing of note has happened in years, so I may do by sending template messages. But this year has been quite surprising in many ways. I want to explain the situation in as few words as possible. But just how concise can I be? Efficient, not good. Furman! Oh, yeah, that's about as least words as you can. And there's the heart she made. Lambert, isn't this a bit... Don't say it. Don't stir the beast. Yeah, don't stir him. Oh, here we go. Character poll. Dang, mine's in first place and Vernon's in second. Oh. I stole first place. Not bad. I got third place. Justice got third place. Nice. Nice. Haha, Ferdinand got third place. Okay, Georgine got fourth place. Yeah, right. And Daniel got fifth place. Nice. Sixth place was Hartmut. Okay, they don't have a picture for him yet. Angelica got 7th. Julie got 8th, of course. 9 is Let's, and Fran got 10th. Nice. The message from you, Sheena. Why is it the third place's winner is just as surprising as it was last time? Not that I'm upset, of course. I adore absolute weirdos like Justice. In the midst of all these new characters, Daniel remains a strong contender. Readers sure do love him. Of course we do! We want him to find love. Oh, wait, I just realized. 11th is Wilfried, 12th is Sylvester, 13th is Benno, Cornelius is 14th, Bonifacius is 15th, Avara is 16th, Charlotte 17th. I'm surprised she's not further up. Mark is 18th, Gil is 19th, and Bridget is 20th. Okay. Thanks to all your passionate support, the second popularity poll was a big success. The results were just as surprising, too. It caught me off guard at how high Daniel placed last time, but now I'm totally speechless. Rosemine beat out Ferdinand for first place. I was wondering who would end up on top when the votes were being cast, and it seems she managed to pull through. Good for her. Still, I'm stunned that Justice got third place and Georgine got fourth. It seems they have more passionate fans than I ever expected. There's also Hartmut managing sixth place. He hasn't appeared visually in the books yet. In fact, he was probably only mentioned once or twice. But these results show just how much the web novel readers have been waiting to see him. Look forward to watching him blossom in part 4. Okay, we are done. I will see you all in the next one.